What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Behind Enemy Lines, a Texas A&M football podcast. I am your host, Tony Catalina from the Austin American-Statesman, and I hope you're rested. I know A&M football is coming off the Week 4 bye week. They had a week off here after beating Notre Dame in Week 3. The number 9 Aggies get back into action at home in Kyle Field against a conference foe, the first of heavy slate of SEC in conference matchups against the Auburn Tigers. The Tigers just lost to the Oklahoma Sooners in a tough matchup, 24-17 in Week 4. So come into the matchup unranked, but I don't think anybody is looking at this game as anything that's going to be close or even resembles a cakewalk. I think A&M knows and their fans know that this is going to be a tough matchup, but something that should be exciting, much like last year. If you don't remember, A&M lost a heartbreaker 4 overtime game. Drop ball in the end zone by Amari Daniels in fourth overtime. So I think A&M has revenge on their mind. I think they understand. Just like the Notre Dame game, they have a chance to kind of resurrect what they had deemed as a wrongdoing last year, and I think that's exciting for A&M to go out there and try to attack that. So let's kind of dive into a little bit of what this matchup is going to look like, some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, some things that Auburn does well and doesn't do well that I think will be a big key factor, maybe an X factor in this game. And right off the bat, when you look at Auburn, I think the number one thing that stands out to me is their quarterback. Denton native Jackson Arnold, obviously a former Oklahoma Sooner, played really inspired football last week, came up just a little short, but the kid has a lot of talent. When you bring talent around people, it allows them to pull their talent out. And obviously, the way Auburn has built out their roster, wide receiver Cam Coleman is one of the better wide receivers. We'll get to him later. Eric Singleton, a wide receiver they brought in from Georgia Tech, he is somebody that is super, super talented. And I think he has really kind of just scratched the surface of what he can be in this offensive group. But with that being said, looking at Jackson Arnold, right? The guy can throw the football, right? He can make plays down the field. He's proven that, but where he's the most dangerous is with his running ability. Now, he's first in the team in rushing attempts with 55. So he's ran the ball 55 times this year. Second in rushing at 181 yards. So he's not doing it at an impressive clip, but he is doing it quite often, right? So when you look at how to defend this Auburn Tigers offense, you really got to start with how do you contain the quarterback? How do you keep him in the pocket and just don't let him get loose? Because just watching the film, I was able to watch some of those. I highlighted it, some of it on Twitter. You guys know that I do all 22 film breakdowns every week. Without A&M playing, I put up some Auburn clips that I was looking at. Kind of helps me get a clear picture here. But all right, so that snap the ball. He's in the shotgun. He's kind of going through his progressions. Soon as those rush lanes lose integrity, he's out the back door. He's taking off 12, 15-yard chunk plays. How do you contain that, right? Do you do a spy? Do you use, we'll see if Scooby Williams is going to play. We're going to talk to, we're going to talk to Mike Elko Monday, recording this Monday morning. So we'll talk to him Monday afternoon. But is it Torian York? Is it Damian Sanford? How do you stop a Jackson Arnold from using his legs? Are they all that worried about it? I think they should be. He's somebody who can flip field position. He's somebody, I always get nervous. 3rd and 13, you kind of back up a little bit. You're playing some man coverage possibly, and he goes out because he's unaccounted for. Those things can happen. Those things happen for Auburn. So it's just something to watch, right? So when you look at it this way, this team is built, you just got to look at how do you defend Jackson Arnold? What does he do well? And his legs and his athleticism is the number one thing that he does well. So just be mindful of how they're going to try to attack you, right? A&M still trying to figure out these things with the running game. I think they're getting stronger, right? Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price last week didn't have all-world numbers that many expected them to against an A&M defensive unit that is, heads taking its lumps early in the season. So look out for Jackson Arnold to use his legs. I think that's the number one thing. If you stop that, if you're limiting his ability, you have a way to really stop them from being, a really dynamic group. Because again, like Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, like I said, they have weapons that can beat you over the top. They have guys that can make play in the passing game. Can you stop the quarterback from extending those plays, getting loose in the back end and making plays there? So that's number one. Number two, on the other side of it, Oklahoma had 10 sacks. Auburn, they had struggled. They had struggled to hold up at the point of attack. They had struggled at the line of scrimmage. 10 sacks is a lot of sacks. Now, on the surface, you say, man, this offensive line, it struggled. And I think that's a fair assessment. They did struggle. They had their struggles against Oklahoma, but anytime you give up double-digit sacks or sacks that are absurd amount of number of sacks, you got to look at something the quarterback's doing. Is he holding the ball too long? And I think in this case he was. I think he's holding the football. He's trying to make plays. Like I said, he knows he trusts his legs. He knows he can get out. He can make plays. When that doesn't work, you become susceptible in the pocket. You become susceptible behind the line of scrimmage, and I think that's where A&M could kind of thrive here. So look for A&M, Cassius House specifically, Ryland Kennedy, TJ Searcy, Dayon Hayes to kind of go out there and try to feast. I'm expecting a game plan switch a little bit, so to speak. So I don't know if we'll see those numbers again this year, right? I don't know if Auburn's going to give up that amount of sacks because I think they're going to adjust the way they attack. They may have and implement more quick game. They might get the ball out of his hand a lot faster, right? There's going to be more design screens, more design, just one step drops out of the shotgun, boom. Um, very limited, I think, in how they're going to let them. And that's a protection, right? They're going to protect the quarterback from taking that many hits. They're going to protect the offensive line from, you know, being put on an island like that. I think A&M has a group that can get after the quarterback, but the way that teams attack them has limited their ability, right? UTSA got the ball out so quick they didn't touch anybody. Utah State, I mean, we saw what Cassius Howe can do if you give him chances, 3 sacks in 3 straight plays. So, and then similarly to Notre Dame, they just get the ball out quicker. They were able to kind of get the space, and they just attacked them in the right way to score 40 points. So if you're looking at the offensive side of the ball, this is some things that are obviously worth watching. This is going to be a battle. I think Auburn is a team that is confident, right? I think this is a team that can play with anybody, and they proved it last year. I know they were 5-7, but they were in games with everybody, and finding a way to beat, A&M at the end of the season, beating them in that game felt like they finally got a payoff on that. So they're 3-1. They're no slouch. Their defense is pretty stout. Their run defense is pretty stout, and that's where I'll kind of switch inside, go to the defensive side of the ball. Auburn is the number 2 rush defense in the SEC. They're giving up like 53 or 58 rushing yards a game. That's impressive. They allowed Ball State -3 rushing yards in a whole game. That's impressive. I don't care who it is. If you're giving up negative rushing yards in a game, that's quality work. So understanding that, man, when is A&M going to let bust out this running game, right? I think everybody coming into the offseason said this is a run-first team, 4 running backs, a stable offensive lineman they feel good about that are veterans. This is going to be a team that leans on people in the running game. And they still can be that, and I still think we expect that to be something that happens this season. But with that being said, their passing attack has been so prolific that I don't think people are talking about it as much. This may be another one of those games where it's like, okay, you could try to run the ball, set it up, see where it works, but knowing that you have a passing attack that should be able to hold up against anybody. So I'm expecting a heavy lean towards the passing game. I could see A&M coming out early and trying to pound the rock just to set a standard, this is what we're going to do, this is who we are, and see if it works out and holds up for them. But that defensive group for Auburn is good. Faulkner for the defensive end may be one of the best pass rushers, best defensive linemen in the country. They got guys who are making plays all over the place. So linebackers lead the team in tackles. It's just they're an impressive group. They really are. So looking at that for me, it's just how does A&M go out there and attack? I mean, scored 40 points in every single game. How long does that last? Is that sustainable? I don't know if it is, right? I think this group is proven to be a dynamic group as they can be, but I'm very intrigued to see now that we get into SEC play, how does Mario Craver respond? We've seen him last year. That's the part that people, I think when they talk about Mario Craver, they look at this breakout candidate, but his numbers weren't overworldly last year, right? I think he had 300 and something yards and 13 receptions, but he was productive against SEC teams last year. So I'm not worried so much to say hey, I think Mario is going to be Mario Craver. I just think that's who he's going to be. Now, what does KC Concepcion do against these guys? Does Terry Bussey continue to develop? See more from Ashton Bethel Roman? These are question marks that I have. I think they're all valid question marks, right? Like Nate Borcher got the game-winning touchdown against Notre Dame. Does he become more of involved in the passing game? Do we see him more from Mari Nyblack? Does Theo Ostrom continue to, be that guy at tight end? So there are some question marks. SEC play changes things a little bit. Obviously, we know the talent and the level raises there, and every game matters. Every week matters. And when you're 3-0 and you're starting the way that A&M does, number 19 in the country, like you got to find a way to continue to stack good games because you don't want this momentum to go away. Last year they started 7-1, finished 1-4, and that was a tough pill to swallow. And I think everybody understood that this offseason they were going to have to take a game by game and situation by situation to kind of get over that hump that everybody just assumes that A&M in the big moment in the big game they're going to wilt down to size. And I don't think this team believes that. I don't think they believe that they're going to wilt and be less than. I think they're fairly confident in what they can do. And I mean, they use the word explosion all off season. This offensive group is going to be explosive. It's going to be explosive. Everybody you talk to use that word, and after 3 weeks, it's hard not to say that that's the case. This team is explosive. This offense is dynamic. This quarterback can throw the football. This running game can lead and can be complimentary. Like, look at that game. The way, I mean, Marcel Reed had his worst completion percentage of his career and still threw 360 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, right? You didn't even really talk about the running game, and Le'Veon Moss had 3 touchdowns on the ground. This team could beat you in a multitude of ways. So I say all that to say, like, Auburn's defensive unit is a quality group. They can hold teams on the ground. They can play as SEC unit with SEC talent, but I think you got to start talking about A&M in that fashion as well. So you look at it, tough against the run, obviously. So the number is 58.2 yards a game. That's that's real damn good. And they held Oklahoma to 35 total rushing yards. So they're a group that you got to be worried about, but I think they can do it. Overall, overarching, right? It's early sample size. They're only 4 games in, so you take it with a grain of salt. But statistically speaking, team wise, this Auburn group is actually pedestrian in a lot of ways. Middle of the pack in almost every category that matters when you look at it against the SEC. Auburn ranks 10th in scoring offense with 32 points a game. The 8th in scoring defense, giving up 16.5. Right, the 13th in total offensive yards, 383.5, and ninth in total defense, 291. So with that being said, this is a team, excuse me, that can be scored on, and they can, they can be scored on, and they have been scored on, and it's a group that can be stopped. So take that with all of a grain of salt. You take it with a grain of salt, and you try to understand that this is a winnable matchup. That's all I'm saying, right? I bring up all these details, and I bring up all this numbers and facts to say like this is a winnable matchup. Now you respect the opponent, you respect the fact that these two teams historically are deadlocked, 7-7. They played each other 14 times in the history. They're locked 7-7. No advantage. I would say A&M, they're 3-2 over the last 5 games, so they have a slight advantage of recent history, but these two teams have played well against each other. The home teams usually came out on top in the most recent history. So, all that being said, you wonder how it's all going to shake out. I'm fairly confident. I think that A&M has the pieces in place to go out there and find a way to win. I think this is an important game for A&M. I think they can find a way to find the internal motivation every single week. But when I look at this week, I'm like, okay, they took down Notre Dame, put themselves on the national stage, put themselves in the national conversation, and they did that by beating a team they lost to last year and kind of resurrecting that demon. Auburn feels that same way to me, right? I think they understood that Auburn was a game that they lost, they should have won, they let slip away. They had a couple of moments. They had a drop, quite literally, that could have extended the game, and it didn't happen. So when you look at this game, they've talked about revenge. They've talked about being focused. They talked about getting, for lack of a better term, getting their lick back on a lot of these teams that beat them last year. And I think this has the potential to be one of those where you're going to see the best that A&M has from start to finish, right? I think you're going to weather a storm. I think Auburn is a tough team who has a similar mindset where, hey, we just lost. We got to find a way to win. But A&M is focused, right? They had a week to rest, healthier, you know, fresher, got a chance to go out there and make an appointment that, they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. I just think that whatever A&M's best is, you're going to see it this week, and I think they have to. To my second point of this long talk here is this is a game where I think in years past, A&M would drop it, and people would be like, oh, won the big game for nothing, right? Doesn't mean anything. They drop the next one. They're just the same old same. If that's the conversation here, then A&M has to find a way to get rid of that. A&M has to find a way to rid that narrative, and I think they find a way to win that game. I think they find a way to come up out here and get a W. So, with that being said, before I choke, to death here, I think A&M gets it done. I think this is a good game against a good team, and but I think A&M's a good team, and I think A&M is capable of taking it to anybody. And right now, there's no reason to doubt them, so I'm not going to. And with that is another episode of Behind Enemy Lines, a Texas A&M football podcast. I'm Tony Catalina. You can find me on Twitter at Tony_Catalina, and I appreciate you guys' time. Peace.